Season 13 is here, and with it, the Halloween Terror event returns with a brand new game mode, Junkenstein's Laboratory. Now, I'm not going to go into all of my full thoughts on the game mode in this video. What I'm going to talk about are the changes that they've made, and if any of them are potentially going to get added to the game, or something that I think are interesting ideas for helping these characters out in the long run. Now, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes with these fun game modes, they make a change that will actually make their way into the live game. Think about in one of the April Fool's changes, Brig, whenever she rallied, she got her shield back bash. Well, that was actually added into the game, and it was a pretty positive change in my opinion. So I like to look through these little game modes and just see kind of like what's up. Are any of these interesting ideas? Is there anything to work with here? So I've gotten all the ones that I could find for each hero that I think are either plausible or in the right direction of something that you could work with. This is not going to be everything, and for the most part, the more realistic changes were all like the one common rarity or like uncommon rarity. The 4 and 3 levels were a little more insane, and I just don't find those to be as interesting to talk about, at least in this context. Obviously they're fun in the game mode, but I'm gonna go ahead, let's just go start barreling through this together. So starting with D.Va, there's one called Fast and Ferocious. It's the fusion cannon damage was increased by 20% when the booster is activated. Now, D.Va already does plenty of good damage while she is boostering, but there is, I think there is a world where if they want to lean into damage on D.Va and move away from defense and survivability, this would be a really fun way to do it so that you are encouraged to keep moving and moving. Probably not the best thing ever. Vampiric Matrix heals for a percent of the damage that you block by Defense Matrix. I think this could be something like this. And actually, we'll see. So the other one, Eldritch Matrix, damage dealt regenerates 15% of your defense matrix charge. Basically, any way to like interact with defense matrix in a different way, kind of encourage you to use it in a certain way, I think is really interesting. Now, Vampiric Matrix is a little more like, how do I say, sustainable, and I think D.Va already has plenty of survivability. So I'm not as sold on that one as much. Dealing damage, giving your defense matrix back, I think is a really interesting way to maybe decrease how much defense matrix D.Va has, but then encourage you to get more frontline and get more bruiser with it so that you can get your defense matrix back, and potentially have it up more often depending on your skill. I think that is super cool idea. That could be a definite way to make D.Va less frustrating, at least in the long run. Devouring Matrix, something weird where using Defense Matrix just to give your team a small damage boost doesn't feel right for the main game, but it is something kind of interesting. Using boosters for survivability with Booster Crash, granting 25 armor for 5 seconds. So if you hit somebody with their boosters, could also be interesting. I'm not as sold on it. And also Beast Hunger, if they wanted to, gain ultimate charge equal to 10% of the damage you blocked. If they wanted to kind of rework how D.Va or other characters honestly get ult charge, that could be an interesting way to do it. Most of this I think is just like cool on paper if they wanted to bring D.Va in that direction, but I do think that this one probably my favorite for D.Va, something that I would not be opposed to seeing on the live game. All right, Reinhardt. Reinhardt has a couple things that we've seen before from other game modes. Fearsome Frenzy, it's that when he increases attack speed as he consecutively hits people. I honestly don't think that's what Reinhardt needs. I don't think he needs to be more threatening up close, because if you've gotten him up close, I think you're probably already in a pretty bad spot. Vampiric Strike, he heals 25% of the damage dealt by Fire Blast, so he could potentially walk up with his Fire Strike. Some of the names in this are kind of weird, I don't know why, but he could potentially walk up with Fire Strike and not necessarily have to burn his shield cooldown to get in, or he could burn the shield cooldown and then get a Fire Strike thinking that you're gonna be able to burn him down when his shield is down, and then kind of get all of that back. That could be something that's pretty interesting, that you have to like not play as clumped up against a Reinhardt, or even if you're not close to him, right? There's still the threat of clumping up against him. He might just get something back really quickly. Kind of interesting. Kinetic Kindling. Each hit with hammer reduces the cooldown of Fire Strike. Could be a nice way to keep his damage up, but I don't think this one is as interesting as the others. Pay in exchange. For every 200 damage you block with your shield, the cooldown of Fire Strike is reduced. So I don't quite like this one, but I wanted to put it in here because it is something that is like interesting, and it is a direction they could take him, but it encourages him to just hold shield and play a distance, which maybe he would kind of need, but I really don't think it's healthy for Reinhardt to be encouraged to hold shield and play like lamer per se. So I'm not as super big of a fan of that one. Demons do restore 10% shield each time hammer and Fire Strike hit. I like this one a little more just because it encourages you to use your whole shield, and then once you're in there, it gives you some of that charge back. So it kind of gives Reinhardt this effective range you have to play around. Like, he already does, but if you're not playing around it properly, it's going to be even more harmful for the enemy team, right? I think this one could also be really interesting. Demons do is restore 10% shield. We just did that one. Scorched Earth. Fire Strike leaves a trail of scorched enemies on the ground. The trail deals 30 damage. So this is just like putting lava on the ground. This one is just silly, but if you needed a way for Reinhardt to zone and have a little bit more pressure at range, this could be somewhat of an interesting option. And then, of course, Demonic Fury attack speed and damage increased up by 25% based on missing health. So now you're kind of encouraged. You've got this weird gameplay loop of trying to find a nice sweet spot of when you're going to have enough health to be safe and good to go, but also maximizing your attack speed and damage, or just like one of the two, right? I think that one could be a really interesting idea, or maybe it's some other buff like speed or stuff like that. So Reinhardt, of course, got some interesting things. Orisa had a couple that I thought were either silly enough to include or were kind of cool. Hurried Haunt. Movement speed increased by 15% when health is above 50%. So this actually encourages Orisa to kind of get in there a little more, and not play back and do like a poking phase. Like, if she's able to move and kind of get in and get out, and kind of play that, like, how much can I press my advantage while I have my health up? And then, of course, you can add the over health that she gets from Fortify, and then you could also counteract the movement speed penalty reduction when she is above 50%. So there could be some interesting dynamics here. I think it's a really cool idea on paper. Doesn't quite fix Ori's problems, and in fact would probably make them a little more annoying, but is a cool gameplay loop for maybe another hero, right? Chilling Blow. When a javelin hits, 50% of the superheat of the improved fusion cannon is consumed. Now, I don't necessarily like this on javelin per se, but I do think it's really interesting that getting rewarded for hitting your cooldowns, right? So maybe a way to make Orisa a little more kind of keep her damage numbers down is to give her something like this, where you make overheat happen way more often, and then using her ability successfully would then give you some of that heat back. Javelin in particular, because when you spin, it always puts your heat down. But also you could nerf Fortify in other ways, and then allow her to just get her fuel back when you pop Fortify or something like that. Kind of an interesting change. Waning Whirlwind. Javelin spin instantly depletes 50% of the max augmented fusion driver's overheat mechanic. Same thing, right? So this is just that one, but when you do Javelin spin, it'll just automatically hit it and go down. Very similar. Grim Directive. While using Fortify, you and nearby allies gain 30% movement speed. Obviously this one's a little more juiced, but the idea, again, of you can nerf Fortify in some regard, but then give it like a buff to other people could be interesting. It feels just like Shout to me, kind of. So I wouldn't exactly go for it, but it's more of like in the ballpark of what we're going for. And Vampiric Javelin, dealing damage with a javelin, restores 100 health. Maybe give her survivability in some other ways on some of her other abilities, so you can take some of that power out of Fortify. Basically, with Orisa, you want to get the power out of Fortify. How do you do that? Couple of interesting ways that I think you could. Alright, Genji had a lot here. I'm just going to go through them quickly. You have attacking enemies from behind, deals 15% more damage if they wanted to kind of give him a little bit more of a niche as like a sneaky character. I don't think it quite works for Genji all the time, and it could be really frustrating. When you land a critical hit with a shuriken, your attack speed increases by 2%. These are kind of scary because these just end up becoming tank buster abilities, unfortunately. But it could be really interesting if Genji has been losing duels. It could give him a way to like turn the tide based on your skill, but again, probably more worse for the tanks. Vicious Cycle. Swift Strike grants 3 ammo for each enemy damage. I think this is a really cool. If you give Swift Strike another thing to it, you could use it in another way. So sometimes you just need to do constant damage to a core or something. You could just dash through them and get a bunch of ammo afterwards. You can just keep the damage pressure up. Or you can dash through on 0 and then you'll get 3 more and you'll get like one last Hail Mary kind of deal. It could be pretty fun, but I'm not like sold on it either way. Eerie Escape. If you fail to deal damage with Swift Strike, its cooldown is reduced by 40%. Now, I think this would be broken, but this is really cool to give Genji more options to get around the map. I've taken this when I've played it, and it makes him so fun. He can go anywhere he wants to, basically, and still be effective by the time he gets around to people. So this one I think is really, really cool. I'd keep an eye on this one as well. Death's Grasp. Dealing damage with Swift Strike causes your next fast melee attack to fire a piercing projectile. Projectiles deal damage equal to 100% of a fast melee attack. I don't think I'm sold on this projectile kind of thing, but augmenting Genji in some other way on successful Swift Strike could be really cool, and it could allow Genji to kind of like snowball just a little bit, like a bit of a power spike once he kills somebody, and now he has a dash reset and an extra special augment. Could be an interesting way to keep Genji more relevant mid-fight, instead of just, you know, either like nano blading or like trying to pick up kills right at the end. Bitter Revenge. Depending on the damage blocked on the parry, using Swift Strike within 8 seconds deals up to 50% increased damage. Oh yeah, another like this could be if they want to bring Genji into like more of kind of like, I would say like an off-tank role. So he goes and he draws aggro and he deflects something, and then his Swift Strike gets empowered up because of it. So you kind of have to like respect Genji a lot more. Otherwise he's going to have a lot more power and a lot more kill threat on you. I think that could be really cool. Dragon Blade's first 3 attacks each increase attack speed by 15% and duration by 1.5. Okay. I really like this one because I think the problem with Dragon Blade is that it's worthless on its own, but then with Nano it's like super broken. So you could in theory bring the damage down a lot if at the beginning it swung way faster, and then once you get a kill, then he resets and he can keep going, right? So basically the beginning of the blade matters a lot more, and it would in theory allow Genji, and maybe it could like just kind of deteriorate through the whole blade. It wouldn't just be like the first 3 swings, but it would in theory allow Genji to kind of set up better and continue and as Dragon Blade goes on, hopefully the team will be following up, so as the swings get slower, there's not as much damage he has to do, but you could potentially use Blade as a nice initiation tool, as an assassination tool if you find somebody. I don't know. And then you could nerf it, and then Nano wouldn't be as effective with it in theory. I think that could be a really interesting way to make Dragon Blade relevant without anything else to help it, right? And then Dragon's Breath, another way you could do this is just add a projectile that comes out of it. Then there might be some skill of trying to hit both the projectile and the swing. Or you can just try and use the projectile to catch people off guard, because it would be, in theory, more reliable than the shurikens. I don't know. I'm not as sold on that one. It's just kind of funny. It's one of the really rare abilities. Reaper, same thing. There's like a attack from behind. I think when below 50% health, Hellfire shotguns damage increased by 15%. I think augmenting your damage through a character that has like a lifesteal is a really interesting concept, because you're trying to keep yourself in a range, basically, to be the most effective, and doing damage actively kind of like counteracts that. So it's a bit of like a weird dynamic. I don't think it would work on paper without any way to kind of like hurt yourself, I guess. But I think that could be an interesting idea to give to Reaper. When below 50% health, the Soul Harvester passive ability life drain. So that's just lifesteal goes higher, so he's like more survivable. I think I like the damage more than that one, because if he does more damage, he's going to get more lifesteal anyways. So when you end Wraith Form, your attack speed is increased by 20% for 3 seconds. I think Wraith Form needs a bit more to it, because it really is just like okay, I have to Wraith and I have to leave for a while before I get my next Wraith out. But if there's some way to encourage you to use Wraith more aggressively in more ways, I think that would be a lot more interesting for Reaper. Soul Glutton. When you drain life while at full health, the Reaping passive grants up to 25% of your maximum health as excess health for 4 seconds. Basically, this is just if they want to get more survivability for Reaper. You get some overhealth if you have full health when you hit people. I think it could be interesting, but I'm not really on board with this one. Damage taken by enemies that pass through Wraith Form is increased. So I think in this one, it's basically like you can pass through people with Wraith and you do damage to them. Again, another way to like have Wraith do more stuff, so that you use it in more ways, I think is cool. And also Shadow Step, in the same vein as Wraith, Shadow Step, reducing the movement speed of enemies within a certain radius of it, is really cool, because that allows Reaper to get a lot more aggressive with it if he wanted to, right? So shadow stepping in is not much of a bad idea, because people are going to be slowed and you're going to be able to easily follow up from them. And since you can see when he's TPing, you're going to know when it's happening and you can still avoid it. It could be a really interesting idea. All right, Soldier. Let me see here. After firing a rocket, your attack speed is increased by 15%. It could be fine. The only thing I see here is that, like, after you fire a rocket, you're going to be firing anyway, so this is just a straight buff to Soldier, and it doesn't really change his dynamics at all. So I'm not really sold on this one. However, I think Biotic Field doesn't really work with Soldier, because he's so mobile, and he needs to abandon his angles because he doesn't have, like, burst mobility. He just has to go away faster, or he has to go away quicker than other people, because people are going to be able to catch him out easier. So if there was a way to make his Biotic Field more reliable to stand in, like taking 20% less damage while you're in it, that could be a really interesting way to keep that ability more relevant. Also, after sprinting for 3 seconds, your ammunition will automatically reload. Kind of a nice quality of life buff, to be honest with you. It keeps soldiers' uptime better. If out of all the changes, I think this is one of the single most, like, you could just add this to the game, and I don't think anyone's going to be, like, mad about it, per se. I think it might just fit in. Telltale Heartbeat, which is a very silly, fun name. I like that one a lot. Biotic Field emits a pulse, damaging enemies in the area. Probably not the best. It's just, like, a little bit of anti-dive, I guess. I don't know. I thought it could be interesting. Biotic Field. Okay, I have doubles on here. Biotic Field, granting 75 shields to all allies, again, would let Soldier have more use to use the Biotic Field, and more incentive to stay inside of it. And a direct hit from the Helix rocket, slowing a target by 35%, I think would go really well with his mobile trying to, like, track you down. And we give Soldier more options when he engages. So that could be a really interesting change as well. All right, Ashe. By the way, Ashe is absolutely broken in this game mode, but Headhunter, I like this one. I like being there. A lot of these are going to be about like trying to use the hip fire more often and kind of being encouraged to use it. This one says, when using hip fire, the damage of your next aim shot increases by 10% up to 100%. Now, I don't think it needs to go all the way up to 100%, but starting with a hip fire and giving yourself up to have a more powerful shot, it's a really interesting dynamic. Typically with Ashe, you start with the scope shot and end on the hip fire, but giving up one of those advantages to have more damage and engagement there, that's a really cool idea. That could give Ashe a lot more decision making than she already has. So I really like that one a lot. After using shotgun, your movement speed is increased if they feel like Ashe is just kind of too fragile, which I don't think she is, but that's another way they could bring her. I like shapeshifting because this gives hipfire a reason. It gives you a reason to use hipfire a little more. If you're within a certain radius, hipfire damage does more, and if you're outside of it, the scope does more. I don't think we really need that part of it, but again, more hipfire I think is really good. Viper's Obsession, again, this is probably like a tank shredder, but if you hit the same target, your damage is increased. So maybe not the best, but Ashe really doesn't need this against squishies. Now that I'm saying it, I'm not as big of a fan of this one. Soul Siphon, critical hits, automatically recharge 1 ammo. That's a really big problem for Ashe. It is a weakness, but it would also reward skillful play. So I'm kind of on the fence about this one. If they feel like Ashe needs something else, I guess, but she's pretty good as it stands right now, and that's one of her big weaknesses, and it should be like that. Pharah. Pharah deals 20% increased damage after using thruster jump and rapid thrust, or whatever her actual abilities are called. I like this one a lot. This, in theory, should encourage Pharah to get in there more often, because especially when you use like the jet dash, which is more horizontal, and it should be like immediately after. It shouldn't just be like the next time you fire a rocket. It should be like even while you're using it, I think would be much more healthy and encourage her to get in there a little more. Maybe it should be within a certain radius as well, because you could just sit in the back line and do all your extra damage. I'm not exactly sure. Jump Jets deal 30 damage and knocks enemies back. Enemies in front are pulled together. I don't really know what that one does, but Jump Jets doing damage again encourage Pharah to get closer and have higher bursts if she puts herself in more danger. Always good. Crouching in the air causes Pharah to slam on the ground, and it deals a certain amount of damage, and you get fuel for it. Yet again, another like get in there, get close, put yourself in danger. You'll be rewarded for it. Really, really cool. And I also have Pharah gains free flight while using your ultimate. Maybe not free flight, but like a little bit of movement could help a lot and make that ult much more relevant. But that's not like a new idea. They're just kind of implementing it here. Mercy. Let me see what I got here. Well, I have something that says Pharah gains free flight while using her ultimate. I don't know how that got there. Let me see. Mend and Mar heals all allies within 20 meters for 100% of the damage dealt by Mercy. This effect increases by up to 200% when Val is active. So this is actually allowing you to do some damage and it not be a troll. Now, I think really it would have to be like a little lower value of healing, but it could be an interesting way to allow Mercy to do a little bit more DPS and provide that extremely valuable, valuable skill to the team, right? Because doing damage from multiple angles, multiple sources, it's always going to be really important. Power for a price heals the target connected to the Caduceus staff by 8% of the damage dealt to the enemy. I thought that was interesting. If they needed to encourage damage boost more, that is certainly a way to do it. But just like a really weak heal. Mercy has a lot more problems, but if that is what one of them they feel is, I think that's a cool way they could implement it. And the cooldown of allies receiving damage boost from the Caduceus staff. Oh, okay, so this is also, in my opinion, if they wanted to get rid of damage boost, they could just have a cooldown boost, basically, where your cooldowns are faster if you're blue beamed. Then Mercy doesn't pocket people as often because that's boring, right? People aren't just going to sit there blue beaming somebody. At least I hope not. She can give it to everybody because everybody needs cooldowns back as fast as possible. That could be a really interesting change. I'm not sure. Maybe not this fast. That's like really fast, but it would help with that damage boost deal. Moira, a couple of these I think I've accidentally doubled up because I didn't copy and paste correctly because my little laptop was breaking. So maybe I've missed some here that I wanted to talk about. But Moira deals 15% increased damage to enemies taking damage from biotic orbs. This could just make Moira really, really too good in a duel. But I like this because it encourages her to damage orb more often. It might be more beneficial to damage orb somebody in a core instead of just healing effectively, right? Because a lot of times with Moira, when you take a fight, you just heal orb your team and try to sustain like a little burst of sustain while you're trying to damage them. You could go for the greedier play of doing the damage orb and also getting more damage because of it. I don't know. Could be interesting. Secondary fire reduces damage dealt by the target by 5%. So this is like them bringing back that weakened element. I don't really like that with Moira. It makes your other characters feel really bad. But it's a way to do it if they wanted to. And I think it's not as annoying because if you're getting hit by Moira, you know that you're going to be getting weaker and weaker. So you have to figure out how to stop getting hit by her, right? Could be cool. Banshee's Howl. While using Coalescence, Moira can now choose to have the beam heal or only deal damage by holding down primary, secondary, fiery. So I've actually suggested this with a Moira rework where it was kind of like she only did one or the other. It was just more interactive, more engaging. I think this could be cool. I don't think it needs to have the efficiency increased. I think if it had more of like when you swapped between them, it had a bit of a burst or something like that. So it felt like you were kind of making a play during Coalescence. Just giving a little bit more burst to your team. I don't know. That could be an interesting way to do it. Zen. Okay. Apparently while using Coalescence. Anyways, Entropy. Critical hits increase attack speed. I think, again, that's like a tank buster one, but it could be particularly good for Zen. Just because he does so much damage. Unknown Horror. Transcendence also applies Discord debuffs to nearby enemies. A lot of times with Transcendence, part of the skill is getting an orb on somebody and then holding it. When you do Transcendence, it'll stay on them the entire time. But potentially using Transcendence to give a full team Discord instead of healing your team could be a really interesting way to use that ultimate. I'm kind of down for it, but it does remove a little bit of the skill of it, and in like a big like brawl, it is just effectively Orbital Ray, right? So it kind of makes it's kind of redundant. I don't know if I'd exactly add this, but it's kind of funny to think about. And then for Kiri, again, for these supports, I thought a lot of them were like really silly and I didn't find much of it. But after throwing a Suzu, your attack speed is increased by 20%. A way to discourage you, in theory, from using Suzu always, like, I don't know, there could be a world where you Suzu early just for yourself, just to get the attack speed. But let's be real, you're going to Suzu a core, you're going to Suzu during a fight, and then you just buff yourself. So Suzu would have to get nerfed, I think, in compensation if they wanted something like this, so that Kiri had, like, decisions to make about how she uses Suzu. And then the only other one is that critical hits add 4 talismans to Kiriko's next heal. So this would take Kiri out of always being the super heal bot, and then allow her to do damage, and then the amount of damage affects how much healing that she gets. So that could be like a really good way to encourage her to flank more often, because doing damage, doing that is really fun. And right now, I think Kiri is kind of a little too fragile to always be flanking. And there's been plenty of metas where you just kind of like sit on your team, heal them, and try to build a Kitsune first because Kitsune is so valuable. So trying to get away out of that, I think would be a really good idea, a good direction to bring her. But yeah, that is it. Please let me know in the comments below which of these do you think are the best and which ones did I miss. I think some of my copy and pasting went over some of the ones I wanted to talk about. So what are your favorites and how do you feel about the Junkenstein's laboratory mode? Please let me know down below. Please subscribe while you're at it. I do really appreciate it. And like the video too. This was streamed live, twitch.tv/Lane Hemingway. That's Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays is when I'm live. There's always something to talk to me about live. And join my Discord. It is down below. Always something to talk about. Give me a hot take, anything like that. Okay. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good day.